Now, to try and help break down the implications of this latest development, we have with us Dr. Bong Young-shik from the Yonsei Institute for North Korean Studies. Thank you for taking the time to come in today, Professor.
Very good to be back here.
Now, President Trump called off Pompeo's visit to Pyongyang one day after Pompeo himself announced he was going. He said there was not enough sufficient progress being made on North Korea's denuclearization. What's interesting is this is pretty much one of the first times that President Trump has admitted that things aren't going well with North Korea. Previously, he's always said things are great, he has a good relationship with Kim. Is this a bad sign, or is this just another kind of Trump negotiation tactic, like when he called off the summit meeting with Kim previously, as that report just mentioned there?
I would just weigh on your second opinion that it's being President Trump being President Trump in the negotiation with North Korea for denuclearization of North Korea. And basically, he thought that if there is no, good steak ready in the steakhouse, why you rush to go to the steakhouse? You just wait for the steakhouse to prepare the steak that was promised to be delivered. So cancellation of his secretary, Mike Pompeo's trip to Pyongyang, is in the big scheme of things, should not be regarded as a failure of Trump's style of the North Korea policy, but continuation of it.
So there are some who say that this was perhaps a very good decision. I'm guessing you would agree with that, seeing as all signs suggested that Pompeo would come back empty-handed from this trip as well.
Right. I mean, the White House cannot afford another trip by Secretary of State coming back with empty hands, because the third trip to North Korea was heavily criticized by the media and the opposition party leaders as an indication of Trump's engagement with North Korea for the purpose of denuclearization. If the fourth trip, would have made the same result, then the criticism would have been, stronger and more relentless. So President Trump thought that it would be rational to preemptively defend itself from possible criticism and opposition.
North Korea so far hasn't given a real response to this cancellation. How do you think the North Korean leadership are feeling now, and how do you think they'll respond?
Very puzzled and anxious, because the style of dealing with North Korea by the Trump administration is based upon the manipulation of uncertainty, unpredictability to its advantages, which has been the hallmark of North Korea's engagement with the United States. So basically, the Trump administration took some key plays from the playbook used to be owned by North Koreans. So North Koreans have to have a very serious thought about how to proceed after this sudden announcement of a cancellation of trip by Secretary Pompeo. And I believe that the vice chairman of the Korean Workers' Party, Kim Jong-un, must be feeling the heat, because it was his insistence upon demanding the United States acceptance of the official declaration of the end of the Korean War prior to North Korea making another concrete steps in the direction of denuclearization, complete denuclearization as demanded by the United States. That was the deal breaker in the third trip by Secretary Pompeo to Pyongyang. And after the end of his trip to Pyongyang, he gathered his counterparts in South Korea and Japan, Foreign Minister of Japan, Mr. Kono, and Madam Kang Kyung-hwa, Foreign Minister of South Korea, in the joint press conference in Tokyo, and they were in unison saying that, well, North Korea may think that it could buy time, but as long as it will not take any concrete steps toward the denuclearization, and they repeat the same message, sanctions will remain in place.
When Trump cancelled the summit previously, when he was negotiating with North Korea as well, Pyongyang was the one, uncharacteristically, some would say, to come forward and ask, well, try to reach out to the US to make the summit happen again. Now, it revealed some of their desperation to wanting a summit. Do you think this is now in a similar situation where North Korea now have the ball back and they have to reach out to the US to try and push things forward? Are they in that much of a desperate situation, do you think?
Well, I mean, North Koreans are in a desperate situation, but this situation cannot be compared side by side, because more players are now involved in the current situation. Because it was reported that the president of China, Mr. Xi Jinping, was coming to the celebration of the National Foundation Day in North Korea on September 9th. There will be a big blessing and a clear signal that China is behind the North Korea. But that would be tantamount to proving that Trump administration of the accusation of China as a willful supporter behind North Korea. So denuclearization commitment by North Korea has been delayed because of China's intervention. That assertion by the Trump administration will become true if President Xi Jinping is going to participate in North Korea's big ceremony. And it also affects what's going to be discussed and agreed in another summit meeting between South Korean President Moon Jae-in and Chairman Kim Jong-un of North Korea. Because if South Korea decides to move too much ahead of the United States in terms of being elastic about imposing sanctions, then it will create cracks between the coordination and the alliance between Washington and Seoul. So the opening of the liaison office in Kaesong seems to be decided by the Moon Jae-in government to be delayed, at least for a while, for the sake of keeping the same pace with Washington in terms of maintaining pressure on North Korea for denuclearization. You
mentioned Xi Jinping and China just there. Trump, in his Twitter tirade, we call it, has also blamed China for not helping with North Korea's denuclearization process enough because of the trade dispute between Washington and Beijing. By pointing this out, do you think this puts any effect towards the dispute with, on the trade dispute and the denuclearization dispute as well?
If there's one distinct characteristic of a Trump administration of foreign policy is, rather than separating discrete issues, Trump administration likes to linking as many issues, how dissimilar they might be, in order to enhance the leverage of the United States in international negotiations. For instance, when there was a rumor that there might be some military conflict for the sake of fulfillment of the maximum pressure on North Korea by the United States last year, then the United States, although it confirmed that security cooperation between two allies was as firm as it has ever been, but at the same time it used the fear of a military conflict on the Korean Peninsula as a leverage to demand the increase of the South Korean government's contributions to defense spending of the U.S. forces in South Korea. So by linking these two issues, even though in dealing with its security partner, the Trump administration wasted no opportunity. Chinese people may be totally puzzled and blindsided that what does it have to do with North Korea refusing to move ahead with denuclearization that trade dispute between China and the United States has. But Trump administration doesn't seem to care. As long as linking these two issues help to increase the leverage of the United States, why not? It doesn't really matter whether those two issues are really linked or not. As long as it helped to advance the United States bargaining leverage, then the Trump administration would not be hesitant to linking those, and that's exactly what happened, as illustrated in his Twitter message.
As you mentioned, Chinese President Xi Jinping is expected to go to Pyongyang for the September 9th anniversary celebrations of the North Korean regime's foundation. What do you think Xi Jinping will now talk with Kim Jong-un about? Well,
first of all, there is no 100% guarantee that Mr. Xi is really going to Pyongyang on September 9th because the equation has been changed, right? And I believe that the summit meeting between South Korean President Moon Jae-in and the Chairman Kim Jong-un of North Korea is going to take place because it was already agreed in the Panmunjom Declaration on April 27th. And in Pyongyang and in the fall. But the content of the summit meeting between President Moon and Chairman Kim will be quite different from anticipated prior to this announcement of cancellation of Mr. Pompeo's trip to North Korea. So every country has to adjust to this sudden change created by the Trump administration, which means that Trump administration is not ready to compromise or give up even the smallest segment of control over the situation on the Korean Peninsula, and with regards to the issue of North Korea completing the complete denuclearization.
Let's talk about that inter-Korean summit that's expected to come up in September sometime. No date yet set, of course, but we know that they have agreed in September sometime. South Korean President, in response, the Blue House, in response to Trump's decision over the weekend, the spokesperson came out and said that President Moon's role as a mediator between Washington and Pyongyang is greater than ever before. That's quite a strong statement, but would you agree with it?
I agree with the statement in the face value, because the Chinese vocabulary for the crisis also means opportunity. So this is the opportunity for Moon Jae-in government to truly come to the plate, to play the role as a mediator or facilitator, whichever you would like to call it. If the Moon Jae-in government in the upcoming summit meeting with Mr. Kim Jong-un of North Korea to come up with a solution to bring together Washington and Pyongyang again, then South Korea's credibility as an effective and trustworthy mediator will be confirmed and enhanced. For instance, if the President Moon Jae-in succeeds in persuading Mr. Kim Jong-un to carry out important steps, like the blowing up important facilities in the Yongbyon site, or getting out of part of its intercontinental ballistic missiles or the nuclear warheads in exchange for the United States acknowledging the need to declare the official end of the Korean War, then I would say the Moon Jae-in government will be very successful in playing the role as a mediator. But if the Moon Jae-in government fails to somehow come up with the ideas that will satisfy both sides, then the credibility of Moon Jae-in government as an effective facilitator of the negotiation between Pyongyang and Washington will be greatly damaged. And the National Security Advisor in the White House, Mr. John Bolton, already clarified the bill or expectation for the United States. He said in a media appearance that the United States was reported by the Moon Jae-in government of South Korea that North Korean leadership had promised. It had promised to get out of the country 60 to 70% of nuclear materials and the weapon materials out of the country by the end of this year. We heard that from South Korean government that Kim Jong-un confirmed this. He made a promise at the Panmunjom summit meeting in April. So now the pressure is not only North Korean leadership, but also South Korean government, who, according to Washington's view, actually vouched North Korea for this.
Very briefly, before we go, Trump also said Pompeo is looking forward to going to Pyongyang in the near future, most likely after the trading relationship with China is resolved. Now, that leaves the door open for Pompeo to visit in the future, but the trading relationship between China doesn't really seem to be settled anytime soon. Does that put all negotiations in North Korea on hold, or do you think the Trump administration is far more flexible than that?
Well, I believe there's another message in this saying that it basically demands the Xi Jinping government of China succumb to the pressure from the United States when it comes to the trade dispute. Otherwise, the United States will make it harder and harder for China and North Korea for the denuclearization issue.
Okay, thank you. That's what we have time for. Thank you for coming in and sharing us your insights as always.
You're welcome.